I still remember the first time he called me hun. Not in a sweet southern way. No, this was condescending, drawled out like I was the receptionist who'd somehow wandered into a C-suite meeting. I was leaning over the boardroom table, highlighting a clause on a printed contract. The same clause that kept us from getting sued by a biotech client who thought non-exclusive meant they could clone our tech in-house. The VP, the new one, straight from a SaaS disaster and still radiating post-failure swagger, barely glanced up from his phone. Thanks, hun. We'll take it from here. That was my third week working under him, my 15th year at the company. Pause right here for just a second. If you've made it this far, it probably means you're into smart revenge stories, quiet power moves, and watching arrogant loudmouths get taken down by women who know the fine print better than they know their own kids' birthdays. So go ahead and hit that like button, and if you're not subscribed yet, do it now. It helps the team more than you know, and we've got plenty more where this came from. Back to it. I didn't argue with him that day. I didn't correct him. I just picked up my folder, nodded once, and left the room like I hadn't spent 2 weeks negotiating that clause in back-channel emails at 11 p.m., while he was still figuring out the office espresso machine. If there's one thing I've learned, it's this. Power doesn't scream. It drafts the indemnity appendix, slips in the arbitration venue, and cross-references the holding company. Power builds things so complex that fools think they can own them just because they hold the mic. I'd been with the company longer than the carpet in that boardroom. 15 years, 4 CEOs, 3 rebrands, and 1 acquisition scare that almost gutted us. I wasn't some background ornament. I was the one who rewrote the licensing framework after the 2013 patent lawsuit, who negotiated the exclusivity buffer that kept our main vendor from undercutting us in Europe, who found the LLC loophole that let us skirt international import taxes without so much as a whisper from compliance. But my title? Senior Policy Advisor. Sounds like I write memos for a living, right? That's what people think when they meet me. Glasses, cardigans, quiet voice. I've been mistaken for someone's assistant more times than I can count. They don't see the whole forest, just the paper it's printed on. My job touches almost everything. Templates, licensing trees, exclusivity triggers, dispute resolution frameworks, but it's all behind the curtain work. People email me to just look this over real quick like I didn't draft the original clause 5 years ago and copyright it through a proxy trust I half own. It used to bother me. Early on, I'd correct people, push back in meetings, make sure they knew whose name was in the metadata of the files they were editing. But after a while, you realize the real power move isn't being seen, it's being embedded. Permanent, structural, that's what I became. Unseen but load-bearing, and those who mattered, they knew. Ethan, the founder, he called me the spine. When we first built out the policy stack, he'd stay late just to talk through risk trees with me, barefoot, sipping LaCroix like it was scotch. He once told a room of VCs, she's the reason we're still solvent. But founders fade, investors rotate, and eventually the company gets too big to remember its bones. So when the board brought in this new VP of strategic partnerships, Jake, all teeth and startup buzzwords, I didn't flinch. I didn't need to. Guys like him think contracts are optional and clauses are just suggestions. He came in barking about synergy and velocity and low-hanging compliance fruit, like any of that meant something in front of the IRS or the EU's regulatory auditors. He nixed 2 of my weekly policy syncs within the first week, told me with a grin, "We'll streamline decision-making." Translation? He wanted fewer people reminding him what the law says when he's trying to promise unicorns to the next big fish. I said nothing, but I took notes. Every change, every edit, every time he opened a contract template and deleted footnotes like they were some kind of formatting nuisance. He even bragged to someone on the biz dev team that he was using ChatGPT to write client clauses because legalese is basically Mad Libs, right? That's when I knew we were in for a show. What he didn't know, what no one bothered to check, was that during the 2020 compliance revamp, I'd shifted several of our licensing agreements into a network of trusts. Not secret, not illegal, just unadvertised. Legal had signed off. Investors had agreed. We needed a firewall, and I'd built one. But like I said, power doesn't yell. It just waits for the right pressure to reveal its shape. Jake brought the pressure, and I'd already sketched the map. All I had to do was wait. The first time Jake rewrote a contract, it was like watching a toddler try to fix a toaster with a hammer and three crayons. He sat in the glass-walled conference room, sleeves rolled up like he was auditioning for a stock photo shoot, cracking jokes with sales while confidently deleting half the indemnity language I'd spent 2 fiscal quarters refining. Then he looked up and said, "I streamlined it. Clients don't want to read all that boring stuff anyway." That boring stuff was what kept us from losing our shirts in arbitration with a German robotics firm last year. But sure, delete away. When I flagged it in the internal system, just a quiet comment, no drama, he replied with a thumbs up emoji. That's when I knew he'd never read my note. A week later, he sent the draft to the client, and just like that, the countdown began. He wasn't malicious, just fast, careless, and arrogantly incurious. The kind of man who believes policy is what happens after he's already made the deal. Jake believed he was hired to inject fresh energy. He told people we were too slow, too risk-averse. "We need to break some eggs," he said in the Thursday all-hands, grinning like he was about to revolutionize a breakfast menu instead of breach 3 licensing covenants. What got me wasn't the ignorance. It was the confidence. Like the rules couldn't possibly apply to someone with teeth that white and a watch that shiny. He walked around the office like a man who thought filing cabinets were quaint relics and legacy staff, just speed bumps on his road to LinkedIn glory. I became a speed bump. He canceled my Tuesday morning legal ops sync, just wiped it off the calendar without even asking. "We'll consolidate into strategic," he said, like combining cross-licensing briefings with revenue forecasts was a stroke of genius. When I asked if he'd reviewed the rollover clauses from our last IP renewal batch, he blinked like I'd spoken Klingon. Then he smiled and said, "We'll handle the little stuff later." The little stuff included a clause that voided our royalty protection if we changed any material licensing terms without third-party consent. And he was already rewriting those terms. He didn't ask for my input, not once. I was carbon copied on a few emails, mostly as a gesture. He restructured a vendor exclusivity deal, slashing a 2-year buffer window down to 90 days, bragging to sales that it would drive urgency. I tried to explain that the buffer was part of a trade-off, early renewals in exchange for exclusivity protections. Without it, the vendor could court competitors the moment we dropped below volume targets. Jake shrugged. "They wouldn't do that. We're a premium partner." Premium partner? We were one missed delivery away from being a line item on their Q4 regret slide. So I stopped explaining. I started recording. I created a new folder in our compliance drive, Policy Drift, FY26. Every time he deleted a clause, skipped a review, or forwarded an edited template without legal sign-off, I saved a copy, quietly, without commentary, just timestamps and versions. People think documentation is boring. They're wrong. It's a blade. You just have to know when to swing it. The moment I knew he'd gone too far, he asked the intern, to pull old licensing templates and clean them up. The girl looked like she was about to cry when I intercepted the request. I told her to forward everything to me and not make any edits without review. "But he said I could," she whispered. I smiled. "And I'm telling you not to. Forward the files." Jake found out. Pulled me aside after lunch and said I was undermining morale. I nodded, said I understood, and sent him a summary of our document retention policy. 2 paragraphs, no emotion, just protocol. After that, he stopped copying me at all, which was fine, because I'd already started quietly requesting read access on every new draft that hit the drive. Just for records. No red lines, no pushback. He assumed I was rolling over. I was rolling tape, and the more he changed, the more leverage he handed me. Because everything he touched, it was traceable. Every document had metadata. Every clause he gutted had a previous version, written by me, vetted by compliance, and signed off by legal. His changes were reckless. But mine were methodical. That's the thing about legacy systems. People don't respect them until they realize what they're standing on. And by then, the cracks have already started forming. I didn't storm out of any meetings. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't send passive-aggressive emails or schedule-pointed clarification syncs. What I did was simpler. I went quiet. People underestimate silence. They think it's submission, surrender. But in policy, silence is a scalpel. And I was done using a spoon. The morning after Jake's latest stunt, pitching a new AI compliance partner without even glancing at their licensing restrictions, I logged into the contract archive, filtered by last modified, and started downloading. No edits, no notes, just copies, one by one. Each file got a unique hash and a date tag. Then I uploaded them to a cold archive, not for retaliation, for preservation. Then I emailed him, just one line. Going forward, please send me final drafts of all new partnership agreements for archiving. He didn't reply. Didn't have to. I wasn't asking permission. That afternoon, I pulled a binder from the top shelf in my office, dusted it off. Inside, paperwork for a holding entity I'd set up in 2017 when we renegotiated our cross-licensing with Valdinix Robotics. It was a boring deal. Defense tech patents, limited commercial overlap, but it was the first time legal let me structure the IP holding through an external party. At the time, it had been purely logistical, cleaner tax implications. But the kicker? That holding party was an LLC I controlled, dormant for 6 years, until now. I reactivated it, paid the Delaware fee, reissued the EIN, filed an update on the registered agent, all above board, no secrecy. But I also updated the beneficiary clause. The LLC now paid its passive income into a trust, not under my name, but my sister's. She doesn't work in tech. She runs a dog rescue in Spokane. Nobody would ever think to look there. Once that was set, I requested a license audit from our finance team, framed it as a legacy cleanup initiative. They didn't ask questions. They were thrilled someone cared enough to organize the cross-licensing map. Jake's name wasn't on the request. Didn't need to be. I wasn't trying to make noise. I was laying the track. The thing about long-term systems is they're slow to turn, but once you shift them, they carry weight. I'd spent over a decade embedding conditional logic into our contracts. Opt-out clauses, exclusivity windows, jurisdictional buffers. Most of it was inert. Background architecture, but it could all be activated. All it took was a trigger. And Jake, he was setting off tripwires without even seeing them. He gave a speech to the sales floor about leaner, meaner contract cycles. Called it his disruption doctrine. Said we were going to move faster than legal could keep up. They clapped. I smiled, even waved. Then I updated a clause in our template. Any partner deal exceeding $5 with a term over 18 months must be reviewed by strategic legal operations. That group didn't exist yet. Not until I formed it, as a subcommittee, under the board's old compliance charter, with myself as interim chair, all legal, all quiet. No fanfare. I stopped attending Jake's vision meetings, sent proxies instead. Let him think I was fading into the wallpaper. He liked it better that way anyway. Less legacy interference, as he once put it during a Slack thread. He didn't know I still had admin access to the archive channel, didn't know I'd exported that thread, or that I'd linked it in the summary doc I was preparing for the board's audit chair, just as documentation, of course. Meanwhile, I started meeting with 3 of our oldest vendor contacts. Quiet calls, no agendas, just relationship refreshers. All of them held carve-outs in our cross-licensing tree. All of them liked me better than they liked Jake. I reminded them politely that any unilateral amendment without legacy sign-off triggered an exit clause. They were grateful for the heads up. No threats, no pressure, just facts. And that's the thing about facts. They don't care about charisma. They don't care about who's got the mic or who's drawing org charts with his name in bold. Facts just exist, quietly, like foundation piles under a skyscraper, invisible, unshakable. Unless, of course, you start removing the bolts. Jake kept yanking at everything, clauses, relationships, protocols, thinking he was innovating. But all he was doing was loosening structural screws that had held this company upright for 15 years. And me? I just kept collecting, because soon enough, the whole thing would tilt. And when it did, they'd finally see the hands that had been holding it steady all along. The email hit my inbox at 8:13 a.m. Subject line, Final Legal Review, Terenza Acquisition Call, hour 10. Only I wasn't on the invite. No link, no documents, just a forwarded thread from a paralegal with no explanation. I clicked into the thread, scrolled, and found the sentence buried 6 replies deep from Jake himself. We don't need her confusing things. Keep this lean. I stared at the screen for a long moment, then closed the laptop. confusing things. He was about to sign a multi-million-dollar cross-border partnership with a Swiss tech firm whose IP filters were still partially under conditional license from a robotics cluster we tangled with back in 2018. Half of the AI decisioning layer in our pipeline, the very thing Jake had been hyping to the Terenza team, was wrapped in regional licensing entitlements I had personally negotiated through 3 nested contracts. He didn't just need me in that room. He needed a fire extinguisher, but instead, he brought a lighter and a tank of gas. I didn't protest, didn't reply, didn't ask to be included. I just opened a different browser, logged into the dormant ClauseWatch dashboard, a monitoring service I helped build back when we thought contract compliance might be automated someday, and ran a query. Terenza plus downstream entitlements. 9 flags. 3 of them were red. One of them was a clause I'd buried in the 2018 Valdenix rollover agreement. It specifically required third-party notification and review if any core tech was sublicensed outside the Daci region. Terenza? Swiss HQ'd, sure, but with a brand new data processing center in Sao Paulo and a dev pipeline spinning up in Malaysia. The clause was more than tripped. It was on fire. And Jake had no idea. He was too busy booking strategy dinners with VCs and hiring another PR firm to fluff his disruptive integration model. Meanwhile, I was crafting polite little letters, no threats, no bold text, just legally accurate reminders to every legacy partner in the IP tree. Dear partner, in light of recent communications suggesting changes to our licensing landscape, we wanted to gently remind you of your rights under Clause 7.4b, specifically, the opt-out provision in the event of sublicensing expansion without partner review. Please consider this a courtesy notice. We remain committed to maintaining alignment and transparency. Warm regards, my name, Strategic Legal Operations, Interim. Every letter was archived, CC'd to legal, sent through certified digital post where applicable. I even used the old letterhead Ethan and I had designed back in the early days, before we had a brand guide, when things still felt like they mattered. That morning, I sent 12 letters. By lunch, 3 partners had replied. All of them appreciated the transparency. One asked to schedule a call to better understand future implications. Translation. They were ready to walk if Jake's deal locked them out or diluted their position. I knew Terenza would catch it eventually. Their legal team wasn't stupid, just polite. The kind of lawyers who give you every chance to fix yourself before they start shredding you politely, line by line. But Jake had mistaken that silence for compliance. He thought the smiles in the last meeting meant approval. He didn't hear the clocks ticking underneath. That was the difference between us. Jake thought contracts were obstacles. I knew they were maps with minds. And the ones he was stomping through, I'd drawn them, years ago, not out of malice, but out of precision. We'd been burned once, by a partner who slipped IP through a shell firm in Cyprus and cost us $250,000 in emergency arbitration fees. After that, I'd rewritten everything. Layered protections, conditional flags, jurisdictional gates. We didn't just license tech. We licensed geography, bandwidth, usage tiers, rollover rights. It was a spider web. Beautiful, delicate, and loaded. And Jake? He was walking straight into it with his eyes closed, waving his little flag that said innovation. I didn't warn him. I did, however, copy our general counsel on the next set of letters. Just a heads up, I wrote. There may be some noise if the acquisition timeline skips partner review windows. He didn't reply, but later that afternoon, I saw a calendar hold appear on his assistant's schedule. Internal review, legacy licensing. 15 minutes, with me. Jake was too busy prepping his deck for the next Terenza call to notice, but the cracks had started, and all I had to do was keep tracing the map. The conference room smelled like stale coffee and ambition. Jake was pacing near the projector screen, flashing that overconfident grin he'd probably practiced in the mirror that morning. He wore a slim-cut suit, no tie, and just enough cologne to scream, "I've never read a full contract in my life." On the table in front of him were color-printed term sheets, 6 pages each, double-spaced, bulleted for clarity. His streamlined masterpiece. I sat in the back. No name card, no mic, just me, and 2 binders. They were heavy, deliberately so. 1 red, 1 black. Each had a single post-it on the front. licensing structure, active agreements, and contingent clauses and triggers. I placed them on the center of the table before lunch. Didn't say a word. Just slid them between the buyer's lead counsel and the investment rep from Grafton Equity. Jake didn't notice. He was too busy talking through synergies. He clicked to a slide titled Unencumbered IP. That's when I almost laughed. Unencumbered. As if the company's core decision engine wasn't locked in a web of tiered agreements, conditional regional sublicensing, and two inactive, but still live, opt-out triggers from when we flirted with a Chinese manufacturing deal in 2019. One clause, buried in a rollover from an early-stage European merger, still required written notification to a joint venture partner in Liechtenstein if any patents were reassigned before 2026. No one remembered that clause existed. No one except me. Jake clicked to the next slide. No third-party claims pending. At that exact moment, Grafton's counsel opened the black binder. I saw his brow furrow. Just slightly. No words. Just the subtle tightening of lips that happens when a lawyer spots something they weren't told to expect. Jake kept talking. What you're getting with this deal is simplicity. No red tape. The counsel turned the page. Clause 3.7b. Immediate opt-out rights for legacy partners if sublicensing structure is materially altered without written consent from strategic legal operations. He turned another page. Appendix E. Map of third-party ownership stakes via licensed IP trust entities. Several were marked with small gray stars. The key was on page 1. Entities partially controlled or advised by J. Haynes. Me. The investment rep leaned slightly toward counsel, whispered something. Counsel nodded, then, finally, looked at me, just briefly. No emotion, no question. But it was the first time anyone in that room looked at me like I belonged there. I said nothing. I didn't need to, because by page 5 of that binder, it was already clear. Jake had tried to sell them a machine without realizing the engine was on lease, and the keys were in someone else's hands. The second binder, the red one, was still unopened. That was the fun one. Jake wrapped up his monologue, clicked off the projector, and stood there, grinning like a man who thought he'd just nailed a TED Talk. Any questions before we break for lunch? A long pause. Grafton's counsel tapped the red binder. What's this? Jake blinked. Oh, that's, I'm not sure. Is that from the finance team? I don't believe so, the counsel said, then opened it. Page 1. Full licensing tree. Every agreement, every conditional clause, color-coded, annotated, with last review timestamps. 96 pages. Page 2. Conditional clause summary. Page 3. Clause 9.4 from the Tarenza draft, highlighted in yellow, marked as non-compliant with 2 legacy partner frameworks, and in breach of Schedule D from the original Valdinix agreement. Grafton's counsel didn't raise his voice, didn't frown. He just said, I'm going to need a few minutes. Then he stood. So did the investment rep. They took the binders, walked to the glass side room. Jake looked confused, then irritated, then slightly pale. He turned to the junior associate next to him. Why wasn't I briefed on this? She shrugged. I thought you had it. He looked at me. I looked at the table, still silent. Lunch was wheeled in. No one touched it. The door to the side room stayed closed for 40 minutes. When they came back out, Grafton's counsel set the red binder down and said calmly, We're going to need to revisit the terms. There are entanglements that materially impact the valuation. Jake started to speak, but the lead investor from our own side raised a hand. Let's take a break, he said. We'll regroup this afternoon. Everyone filed out slowly. I remained seated. Jake passed by on the way out. He stopped. Opened his mouth, closed it again, didn't say a word. Good. I wasn't done yet. Jake opened his laptop like it was a weapon, clicked too hard, spoke too fast. He'd been rattled since the red binder, and now we were back in the big room for round 2. Grafton's counsel flanked by 2 associates, the lead investor silent at the end of the table, fingers steepled in front of his mouth. The air was colder than before, tighter. Jake launched into damage control. There's been a lot of confusion, he began, eyes flicking toward me without saying my name. Some of these so-called entanglements are legacy clutter, clauses we've functionally outgrown. We've modernized since then. Grafton's counsel didn't blink. Functionally outgrown is not a legal standard. Jake smiled too wide. We're aiming for flexibility here. Flexibility, the associate said, does not nullify third-party rights. Clause 3.7b is actionable. Jake shifted in his seat. That clause has never been enforced. But it exists, the investor said, voice calm. And if even one of those legacy partners pushes back, we're looking at months of litigation and potentially revised valuation terms. Jake's jaw tightened. I didn't speak. Not yet. He started flipping through a PDF, trying to find footing. We're in the process of consolidating our IP holdings. These licensing lines are historical noise. Look, our current term sheet reflects the simplified model. That simplified model, the counsel said, contradicts no fewer than 6 active agreements. Jake's voice rose. Okay, look, I don't think you're appreciating who you're dealing with here. I was brought in to untangle this exact kind of thing. I've been leading the strategic arm of this company for a year. Do you have any idea who I am? He barked, loud, defensive, sharp enough that even the intern stopped typing. The room went silent. That's when I slid the card across the table. Just a small white rectangle. No flourish, no speech. The lead counsel picked it up. Read it. His eyes flicked down, then back up. His head tilted slightly. You could feel the air recalibrate. He passed it to the investor, who glanced at it, then leaned back with a faint, amused exhale. Actually, son, he said to Jake, voice like gravel wrapped in velvet. Do you have any idea who she is? Jake looked at me. Really looked. The card said, Julianne Haynes, Managing Director, Orenda IP Trust Controlling Stakeholder, 70% Core Licensing Pool Strategic Legal Operations, Interim Chair. His mouth moved, but nothing came out. Those legacy entanglements you've been deleting, I finally said, they weren't clutter, they were infrastructure, and most of them route through Orenda, which you never once reviewed. He blinked, color draining. Grafton's counsel turned to me. Do you have a current map of active sublicensing tiers? In the red binder, I said. Appendix D, all cross-referenced and time-stamped. Would you like a digital copy as well? Yes, please. Jake sat down. Not by choice. More like gravity remembered he wasn't supposed to be standing. From that moment on, no one asked him another question. They didn't have to. The buyer team rotated their chairs, shifted their laptops. Every query from that point forward was addressed to me. Questions about entitlements, opt-out provisions, notification windows, rollover rights. I answered them all with quiet, clinical precision. No bravado, no jabs. I wasn't here for revenge. I was here because someone needed to keep the damn thing from falling apart. At one point, the lead investor gestured toward Jake, still frozen in his seat. Does he need to be here? He asked. I looked at Jake, then back. Not for the legal portion. Jake didn't argue. He just closed his laptop slowly and walked out. Didn't say goodbye, didn't even look back. And for the first time since he showed up with his shiny watch and startup swagger, I felt something like silence settle across the room. Not peace, but precision. And for me, that was better. The first official act after the implosion was surprisingly anticlimactic. Grafton's counsel slid the entire term sheet back across the table and said, We'll need this redrafted by someone who understands the structure. They didn't even say Jake's name. Didn't need to. He wasn't in the room anymore. The investor nodded toward me, then said to the group, All future drafts go through strategic legal ops. Let's clean this up. I gave a small nod and began stacking the binders. I didn't gloat. I didn't smirk. I just got to work. Calm, controlled. That was always the thing about me. I never needed to scream to be heard. I just needed to be the one who knew where everything was buried. The documents were a mess. Half-baked clauses, missing jurisdictional anchors, timelines that contradicted existing rollover windows. I brought in 2 attorneys from our old vendor contract team, people who still had the institutional memory Jake had tried to erase. Together, we built a clean version of the term sheet in under 72 hours. Every clause annotated, every risk tagged, every legacy condition flagged and resolved. On day 2 of cleanup, a text buzzed through from a number I hadn't seen in months. Ethan, founder. Always knew you'd be the firewall. Proud of you. No emojis, no punctuation flares, just classic Ethan, direct, grounded, and 10 steps ahead, even when he was retired. I stared at that message longer than I probably should have. Then I locked my phone and got back to it. Jake, meanwhile, was nowhere to be found. Word floated around that HR had pulled his system access the morning after the blowup. Not officially terminated, but on review. Whatever that meant in corporate speak. He showed up once, midweek, hovering near the second-floor espresso machine, but left quickly after a quiet, pointed conversation with our GC. I didn't see him. Didn't need to. I was in the big conference room with Grafton, going over red lines line by line. They were asking real questions now, about data separation in sublicence chains, about retroactive license activation protocols, about staggered ownership vesting inside the Orenda Trust. Every answer I gave brought another question, and every question brought another realization. They'd been negotiating with the wrong person the entire time. It was never about who had the mic. It was about who held the floor. I added a new review step to our internal policy engine. Nothing dramatic, just a formal requirement for contract clearance through strategic legal operations before external deal engagement. Approved by the board, enacted by end of week. No one challenged it. Even legal blessed it like it had always been there. HR pinged me quietly. Would you be available to consult on a review of Strategic Partnerships decision trail for the last 6 months? We've found some inconsistencies. I said yes, of course. They sent me access to Jake's revision logs. I didn't open them right away. There was no rush. Paper tells the truth eventually. By Friday, I was asked to step in as acting executive director of strategic legal operations, interim, for now, but with full authority over contracting workflows. I declined the corner office they offered. Too exposed, too noisy. Put me by compliance, I said. I like quiet. They obliged. I moved my binders, hung no photos, brought no plants, just a silent desktop monitor and my decades of architecture. That afternoon, one of the interns, same girl Jake had once asked to clean up legacy templates, knocked on the frame of my open door. Miss Haynes? Just Julianne, I said. She hesitated. I saw the org chart update. Does that mean you're in charge now? I smiled, just faintly. I've always been in charge. People just forgot where the structure begins. She nodded, eyes wide, and walked off, probably already texting someone. By the time the new draft reached Grafton's inbox, they replied in under an hour. This version reflects our expectations in full. Proceed to close. The foundation had held. Jake was gone, and the weight of what I'd built, quietly, methodically, invisibly, was finally, fully visible. The official announcement was 3 sentences long, no adjectives, no ceremony, just a line about leadership restructuring, another about role transitions, and a final bullet. Julianne Haynes appointed Executive Director, Strategic Legal Operations, effective immediately. It hit inboxes at 9 a.m. By 9:03, my Slack was a war zone of shocked emojis and subtle congratulations. The real surprise, though, was the line buried in the update no one wanted to say out loud. Jacob W. to shift focus to exploratory research and long-term partner strategy development. Translation: exiled. No more deals, no more speaking roles, no more signatures. I didn't ask for his demotion. I didn't even know it was happening until HR pinged me with the org chart draft for my awareness. But I'd be lying if I said I wasn't relieved. Not because I needed him punished, but because the structure couldn't afford another him. I'd spent too long watching good systems get wrecked by arrogance disguised as momentum, so I started rewriting. First step: mandatory policy review on all outbound contracts over $250K, not optional, not recommended, required. Every clause routed through a compliance checklist I'd quietly refined over the last 6 years. Jurisdictional flags, sublicensing tripwires, indemnity traps. The review log auto-generated a trail. No approvals, no send, period. Second step: revoke all streamlined templates. Too much damage baked into them. I issued an immediate freeze, archived the whole library, and restored the originals, footnotes, appendices, and all. The pushback was minimal. Jake had left such a mess no one wanted to defend his shortcuts. Third step: rebuild trust. I reached out personally to every legacy partner who'd received one of my quiet warnings. Scheduled real calls, not delegated, not emailed, calls. We talked through clauses, recommitted timelines, clarified rights. Every single one of them agreed to stay. None of them asked for Jake. And me? I moved offices. Facilities tried to put me in the executive wing, big corner glass box with a view of the city skyline and a stupid little espresso machine in the corner. I declined. Put me near compliance, I said. Windowless is fine. They looked confused, but they did it. That space felt right. No noise, no distraction, just walls, binders, and policy. Order. I brought back the old filing cabinet Ethan used to tease me about, called it the steel coffin. But inside it were 15 years of ground truth, the things no spreadsheet could capture. At lunch, I walked the floor. People had started calling me director now. I didn't stop them. But I also didn't lean into it. The job wasn't a prize, it was a firewall. Jake passed me once in the hallway, clipboard in hand, eyes low, expression drained of the shine he once wore like armor. We didn't speak. He nodded faintly. I returned it. That was enough. He'd been reassigned to exploratory partner research, a non-role tucked into a budget line no one would ever audit. His calendar was blank, his Slack icon grayed out before noon every day. And still, I felt no triumph. Just recalibration. I wasn't here to win. I was here to prevent collapse. By week's end, the board sent a short message. Appreciate your leadership during transition. Stability has returned. I didn't reply. I just opened a new document and titled it Structural Safeguards, V1.0. Because the next time someone like Jake walks through our doors, dazzled by speed and ignorant of weight, I want the floor to hold anyway. Not because I'm watching, but because I built it to. The deal closed on a Tuesday. Rain outside, hard and flat against the windows as if the weather knew we needed quiet. The Grafton team arrived early. No suits this time, no theater, just tablets and sharp questions already answered. We'd scrubbed every term, reviewed every clause, redrafted every scrap of policy until the bones showed clean. No spin, no fluff, just structure that held. At 10:32 a.m., the Buyers' Council looked up from the final packet and said, "We're ready to proceed. One condition." I set my pen down. "Go on. We'd like you to stay on, not just as interim, as retained advisor, long-term, oversight of policy continuity." I nodded slowly. "Fine, but I have one condition too." They waited. The clause framework stays. Every safeguard, every cross-licensing trigger, every fallback provision, especially Schedule E. He didn't hesitate. Done. We both signed. They took a photo. Someone always takes a photo. The handshake shot. But afterward, as everyone stood and stretched and buzzed with the weight of finality, I quietly typed one more note. Not dramatic, not for applause, just protocol. To legal OPSI company subject, final confirmation. Body, all rights, as per schedule, E retained. JH. Then I closed the laptop. Outside the conference room, I stepped into the hallway just in time to see Jake. Cardboard box in hand. No suit, just jeans, sneakers, and a faint shadow of whatever ego he hadn't boxed up yet. He was walking slow. Not dragging, not rushing. Just quiet. When he passed my office, small, windowless, lined with compliance binders, he didn't look in, didn't nod, didn't blink, just kept walking. I didn't call after him. He didn't owe me an apology, I didn't need one. His absence was enough. Minutes later, I stood alone in the room where the deal was done. The table cleared, the binders shelved, the chairs askew like the end of a play. I looked around, breathing it all in, not the moment, but the infrastructure. The unseen lattice beneath every decision, every agreement, every boundary respected only because someone bothered to draw it. Not someone. Me. He'd come in loud, all flash and pitch decks, announcing himself like the room belonged to him. But the room, I built it. Quietly.